Hello, everybody in the house. Say yeah! Yeah, that's right. I just want to check how interactive are you. So, before we start to things, first of all, I'm not affiliated with these guys. It's just that for some reason, all my favorite games and my favorite developers are from Poland. So if you're a developer from Poland, send me your shirt and I'll say, oh, I'm not affiliated with them, just it's my favorite stuff. That's one thing. And the other thing is, I want to thank you all for showing up in huge number, and I'm not being sarcastic. Writing talks and narrative design talks are always among the least popular on each conference, but in this occasion I have extra gratitude for you, and I want to share you a little story, and if I start ranting, just someone show me like this or something. It took me basically 30 plus hours to reach here. 4 flights were cancelled, 1 airplane broke down. I filed 2 lawsuits against some companies, and there was a hurricane over Warsaw. So I don't know about you guys, but I'm really grateful to be here, finally in Poland and in present again. So in view of crooked airlines and climate changes and pandemics. I'm really, really happy to see you all, guys. Thank you. So we're going to talk about how versus what choices in games. And it occurred to me that it's really a topic that has never been discussed. In fact, it's not even my invention. That's like what versus how choices. I learned it from a person in a company that I will mention, of course, a bit later. But it's something often overlooked, like how do you craft your choices? What do they mean for the game? And of course, it's my favorite topic. I've been talking about choices a lot. But there's this really nice difference between what and how. And it's not only on a tactical level, like how to place your choice in the game, but also it's on a strategic level. It affects the whole structure of the game. And I'm really happy that I'll be able to showcase you 2 of the games. The case of audio games. Why audio games? Well, first of all, because my experience with how choices, it was born while doing audio games, and they are really interesting genre. Basically, it's games for Alexa, Bixby, and for these smart devices. And they bring to bear quite interesting challenges that make them a really great teacher. There's really a lot to be learned from working with audio games and talents that want to write for audio games. And if there's some young writers among you, I really recommend it because it sharpens your skill like nothing else. Okay, for those who don't know, who am I to talk to you about all this? Well, I was a game designer and game producer, and in the same time I was a game journalist for quite a long time, a writer and teacher of creating writing. And then I combined these 2 passions of mine and I've become narrative designer. Now, narrative designer today is sort of what the game writers would like to call themselves, because no one even cares for game writers. Like, oh, you're a game writer, good for you. Like your Instagram model, that's the same level of like, oh, game writer, cool, I get you. So everyone's narrative designer now, but I must say I'm proud to say that I'm actually doing the design of the narrative structures, teaching writers, coaching writers, and it's fun. Frustrating, but fun. Also, my marketing manager will kill me if I don't mention that Grandpa Tiger's narrative design is part of the Red Viking Academy. So check us out. Yeah. Okay, but these guys I really have to mention because they're the reason we are here now. Hi, Patrick. So Ereality is a German startup which does storytelling content management system for smart audio. What it means is that they provide not only audiobooks and audio games for smart devices, but also they work with clients mostly in automotive industry, because a lot of cars today, I didn't even know that has this sort of smart smart audio device where you can talk to your car or something. So apparently it's a big thing, and they also make some training audio and instructions and whatever, commercials, interactive commercials. And it's really crazy how passionate these guys are, and I'm really thankful to have stumbled upon them and started working with them. Not only because it's been a really interesting year and new discoveries and new format, so to speak, but also because basically I started teaching writing for games and narrative design because I wanted to give the chance for people who want to get in the industry and are not artists or programmers to sort of get in. And I'm really proud that we work in Ereality. We work with young talents, industry veterans, whoever wants to write. So if you decide to be my student, say, hey, teach me. I'll say, yeah, not only I will teach you, I will give you a job. So yeah, woo. Good for me, huh? Twist Tales is mentioned because they've developed this really cool engine. It sort of looks like Twine, if you're familiar with Twine. Yes, you are? I see nodding people, it means yes. It's a bit easier than Twine, not so programmatic in the sense that you cannot do wonders, but it's tailored for the needs of the audio games. And yeah, we had all kinds of writers, like people who have no experience with game design, people who only do the game design. And I'm also proud to say that we also have one quite interesting guy from Ubisoft who's doing some working on Siberia franchise, and they're also preparing something for us. So Twist Tales is really cool. You just say, Alexa, whatever, start the Twist Tales, and there's a list of games, and you can start and listen to them. And the format is interesting because total runtime of a game that is sort of empirically becoming a standard is 60 minutes, but it's played in like 15 or 20 minute chunks. So like 1 to 3 or 1 to 4 is the ratio of how much total content has and how much of it you actually play. And yeah, I'll talk about the specifics of audio games a bit later. Let's talk about interactive storytelling. So what I'm going to talk about today is not just for audio, so it's not like totally focused. That's there are the after my talk, there's just 2 of those pepperonis, not 3, because it's not going to be specifically addressing just the audio games. This is really something which matters for, I believe, all interactive storytelling. Whether you're writing a game, which means like a game that's actually consisting of gameplay where player reads, and then makes a choice, or if you're writing for a game where you're like play, shoot, or I don't know, kill, and then there's some choice. So this is about choices and strategy and tactics of making choice in a better way. So I believe it will be helpful for all interactive storytelling. And also it reminded me of an early definition of what's a game that I heard at the beginning of my career, that a game is a sequence of interesting choices. And I really agree, like if we decide to play hide and seek or Squid Games or something, those are some really interesting choices that you're gonna make. Like, are you gonna hide there, or stand here, or throw yourself in the garbage bin, whatever. So the game is always about like what to do next, what choice to bring next. Even in the days of before the text. So I would also dare to state that crafting choice is important even if you don't have text-based storytelling. And so next question naturally comes like, what makes an interesting choice? So the 3 basics of making an interesting choice is how to make them relevant for the player. how to make them properly paced, and how do they reflect the values in your game. Mind you, because interactive storytelling can also be a game. That's why I said writing for a game. In this category we have visual novels, we have interactive fiction, we have game books, choose your adventures, whatever. So for each of them, it's important how the players experience it, in sense that to be relevant, each of the choices need to be informed for a starter. Which means, like, I cannot ask you, are you for red, are you for blue? Because you have no idea who are the reds and who are the blues and what are you standing for. And that's something which is really tricky for basically every game where you have to start early, because typically you want to start with early choice. Our case in audio games is that people would like to hear some introduction, some scene, but they also want to have a chance to say something back to the Alexa, to make a choice. So more or less every 30, 45 seconds or a minute tops, you want to have some interaction with the game, otherwise it becomes quite boring. Of course, we'll discuss pacing in a moment, but it creates a problem for writers because you have to set up the story, explain something to the player, and then their attention is not even there yet. I mean, see, this is like what, fourth or fifth of the slides, and we didn't even start talking about the juice of this topic. So every story, every explanation needs some sort of intro. So it makes it really difficult to craft these early choices. But even them, they need to be informed. So a player needs to know why would they make a choice. Do they have enough information to make a choice? Second thing is that obviously the choice needs to be meaningful, which means, do they contribute to the story or to the drama? In this regard, choices are often quite similar to dialogues. Like, dialogues not only need to be natural sounding, flowing, blah, 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 fun, they also need to propel the story forward, which is another great topic, like why isn't it happening all the time? But you cannot just ask your player like yes or no, or sometimes you can, but you cannot really just have a choice because there is a slot for a choice right now in your game. And especially if you're writing for a game, if your player is playing something that they consider fun, like, I don't know, turn-based tactical battle or something, if you're presenting them with a choice after that big fun, it better be very meaningful, very important. Consequence means that will my choice matter? There's nothing worse, and you can lose your players if you ask them a choice and then they go on and then they realize this has nothing to do with me. This doesn't matter. I mean, the story or the game just goes on. It does not mean that your choice needs to have material, like a consequence in sense of some variable change. Especially tricky is if the player cannot see that. I'll tell you a story about Jeff Vogel's game. I think it's Abaddon, the Black Fortress. Did anyone play it? No, shame on you. Basically, it's very well written old school RPG where a player is cast in a role of agent of a powerful fortress, and they are sent in the world to, you know, deal with all kind of bad situations. But very early in the game, a player encounters a peasant, and the peasant asks player, "Why did you decide to become an agent of the Black Fortress? I mean, it's a powerful position, but why did you choose it?" And the player has 12 options. Because I want to be famous, because I want to be rich, because my mom and dad were killed by evil, because of the 12 options. And player simply decides what answer to give. And the game never again addresses this choice, because there's no need, because this choice is questioned to the player what kind of motivation you want to play in this session, what kind of motivation you want for your character. So that's what I mean consequence, in the sense that it doesn't need to change variables your game, but it needs to give something to the player. when we're talking about consequences in a traditional sense, like some variable change or a variable track or whatever, I prefer to first of all refer to the game design principle of signals and feedbacks. That's why the choices need to be informed. So you need to signal player that, hey, there's something important going on here. You're going to make an interesting choice. Watch out, save your game, whatever. And then you want your player to experience a feedback after a choice. Like, okay, the game acknowledges that you made that choice. So immediate feedback is important, but even more so is important the mid-game or mid-term feedback, so to say. What does it mean? It means that a player will feel better, especially if they're playing an interactive story, if they feel that they're part of the story. And they can feel part of the story if their choices matters, if the game remembers or knows their choices. For example, were you a brave princess?
Of course.
Once?
Twice.
Twice. So it would be nice if the game, pauses for a second, says, he was a brave princess twice. It makes, feel good, like, oh, I got some little achievement. So it makes sense for me to continue playing this story, which is very important, especially in a medium which is not visual, which is not enticing all your senses. It's important to have this kind of feedbacks. And of course, there is the always present and always interesting, like, ultimate choice, in the sense that something you do very early in the game, you want to see it, reflected in the very end. In one of our horror stories, a player can, they encounter some animal, and it turns out that it's not a coyote, it's a dog. Do you feed the dog? Do you shoot the dog? Do you yell at the dog? And then in the end, dog saves you from zombies or not, or turns out to be zombified dog or something. So this sort of like plant it early, reap rewards later is always good tactics. And it's also something you have to have in mind when you're dealing with the relevant choices. And in the end, properly framed. What does it mean? It means, do you write your choice in such a way that the player sort of can expect that what you've presented them with will carry on, will happen. I always give example of a very poorly written game I'll not mention the name, not to shame the authors. But like, they ask me, like, do you want to do it very carefully or do you want to do it very, bravely? And I say, very carefully, of course. And then like, oh, you were not careful and they shot you. And I was like, what? But I just said I want to make it carefully. So this sort of discrepancy kills the immersion, makes you rage quit, and, sadly, you've probably experienced it. Pacing, of course, is important because it depends on your narrative format. In a game with a lot of gameplay, your narrative time and space can be very narrow because you don't have time to tell the story all the time. You have some inserts where the story comes in, but you probably don't have enough time to, be telling the story all the time. With audio games, it's really crazy because we have nothing but story and choices. So we should have a lot of narrative time and space, right? But in fact, it's quite tricky because I need to tell you a scene in 30 seconds max and then ask you a relevant question and then play you another 30, 45 seconds scene and then ask you another question. So I have a sort of quite tricky bits where my game is constantly setting out scenes and trying to come up with a very interesting choice so the story progresses. So the time and space for our format is like quite crazy, like one interaction every minute or even less. And sometimes you cannot tell a story in 15 minutes. I mean, we're giving 1 hour for this talk, and I'm trying to talk fast so we can cover everything. So it's not very easy as it sounds. Like, oh, I'm listening to something 1 hour. Like, would you watch a video on YouTube 1 hour unless you're doing something else? I thought so. And in the end, it's important that choices have something to do with the values of your story, with the themes of your story. That's a big topic, like how to connect your theme and your story with the variables, but I'll just say that it's quite important for the players to have some variables tracked, to have some variations in the story, but also they have to be somehow connected to the theme. Depends on your structure, blah, 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 not to bother with, you with that, but if there's like one take I can give you after this lecture, let it be this one. So the choices, even in the games which are when you're writing for a game, even if you're writing a game, the choices are not just the way to reach to the end. They are the story. Because whenever I say choice, I mean the whole choice station. The things that come before, how you phrase it, what are my options, and how do they play out, and how do they connect to the next one. So basically, that's the interactive story. That's the game, a sequence of interesting choices. Okay, so let's see, why is audio games such a great teacher? Oopsie, what did I do? Did I kill it? Yep, I did. Sorry. So anyway, oopsie. The guys are fixing it. View, F5, Ctrl F5, present, yes, great. Check. Sorry for this, guys. Yes, so the first thing is the limited narrative space. As I just said, it seems like a lot, but it's really not. Why? Let's see. Did you ever receive a voice message on the phone?
Yes.
And how long are they in the average?
40 seconds.
Exactly. If you see a voice message that's over 1 minute long, you go like, wow, they really had to say something, right? And if it's longer than 5 minutes, like, why didn't you call me? So basically, no one wants to hear more than 45 seconds at a time. Not even people who are like, okay, I'll play an audio game while I'm driving my car or while I'm doing something in the kitchen. Alexa, play the game for me. So it's actually a quite limited narrative space. I have to tell you who you are, why you're there, what's your motivation, what's your goal, you know, and then come up with interesting choice now, in 30 seconds or less. The second thing connected with this is replayability. Basically, once you start playing an audio game, you listen and listen and listen, and then you don't want to go, you know, back and listen to it all again, just to see some variations, like, oh, I didn't go left, I'll go right. Pfft, who cares? This is actually something quite good, something quite important for writers, because even if you're not writing for audio game, you want your choices to be like that. You want your players to say, hell yeah, I'm not saving a game and reloading again. I want to stick with this choice I've made. That's how I make a good choice. That's how I write a good choice. Crafting it in such way that they don't want to, you know, reload and start again, or like peek in this branch, then peek in that branch. You want them to enjoy the whole story. Sadly, for audio games, we have something like 1 or 2% of people who actually replay a story, but so we have to write them that they're great from the first go, that they have no dead ends, and that you can enjoy the story in those 15-20 minutes. And also, you have limited multimedia effects. Of course, we have voice talents and we have some sound effects, but you cannot rely on visuals, animations, special effects, you know, shaking of the joystick or whatever. Oh, I'm too old mentioning joysticks, right? Okay. So there's just the voice and the story. That's it. But in the same time, they provide greater immersion. So whatever you're writing, because even if you like text-based games or visual novels or interactive fiction, you're not reading it. you just scan through the block of text and then decide sort of in a split second if it's interesting, worth reading or not. And then you read the choice and see if you can keep track of the story just by, checking choices. Someone's smiling, they recognize this. Yeah, I'm also doing that. I mean, I should be more professional and like read every bit written, but I don't do it. I just scan it with my subconscious eye. Like, okay, this is worth reading. I'll do it. Oh, there's an image. I get it. This is what's going on. I connect the image with the choice, and then that's it. So here, players don't have this luxury. It provides greater immersion because they're listening. It's immediate. Oh, I'm entering the house. Oh, there's a dog in there. Fuck. It's a lot stronger. But in the same time, it doesn't tolerate poor writing. So if I'm listening to some narrator drawing on about something that's really poorly written, I'm quickly losing my interest. Also, audio stories have greater emotional impact, from immediate like, "Ooh, I thought I heard something," to being more, how to say, by nature, I don't know, psychologists would probably explain it better than me, but they're more connected to us. I mean, when your mom is scolding you like, "Do you listen to me? What I say to you?" It's not like, "Do you see me being angry at you?" No, it's like, "Do you listen?" So listening is something important for us as human beings. And of course, there's a greater focus, because I know people who start a desktop game, then turn on a mobile game, and then while the desktop game is loading a level, they play 1, 2, 3 levels on the mobile game, and then like doing this. For audio games, it's not possible because sometimes you're playing them while driving, sometimes you're playing them while you're doing something else. But ultimately, because of the listening, you have to, give them your attention. So let's see, what are the what choices? So the what choices are typical in sense that every writer knows instinctively what they are. It's like, what do you do? What do you do next? Did anyone here play tabletop role-playing games? Just 2 of you? Oh, come on, yes. So what's the most common thing GM says? Like, what do you do next? And then you're like, oh, I don't know, find some rats, kill them for XP or something. So everyone wants to know, what do you do? It's also not, how to say, it's not the fault of writers or GMs. It's also ingrained in our psychology. Like, we want to know what's going on. If I go to the movie, I'll ask you, what's the new movie about? And then you'll tell me what's going on, because I don't care about what's the theme, metaphysical layer, blah, blah. I want to know who done it. So typically, not only the story will be told in this way, but also the choices will be crafted like, what's the action your character does? What's the action your character takes? Where do you want to go next? What do you want to do? Where do you want to do? Where do you want to go? And this is really cool because it promotes exploring, so I can explore the game space. It promotes direct action, like, oh yeah, I swing my sword at the goblin. And it can be really clear and precise, and it's easy to write. But the emotional connections and emotions are not always implied. Like, you just do it, and you could do it in many different ways. Like, oh, he told me something. Like, was he angry? Was he sad? Or I don't know. I take a swing at the goblin. Like, is it like, give it my best kind of swing, or just, go away from me? The character is detached from the action often, and the player is also detached from the character. So that's also a tricky part with what. And they lead to heavy branching, which, if you have the time and if you have desire for your players to have great replayability, is a cool thing. But in audio games, which no one wants to replay, wide branching is a big no-no. It's really trouble. I mean, I will show you structure of a story, and I'll say disaster, and you'll say like, what? And this looks like a normal interactive fiction. Yeah, but in our case, it's a disaster to have this heavy branching. So, what are the how choices? And here I will repeat again what I mentioned in the beginning. The how choices can be a tactic, Like, you can really write them differently than the what choices, but they're even more helpful when you consider them to be your strategy, your narrative strategy, the way you plot your structure. The how choices is basically a question, how do you proceed? What's your approach? What thoughts, emotions, experiences are you bringing to the action? What quality traits of the character come in play? It basically differs from what choice by defining like how do you do it, like what, like who, like what quality are you displaying. For example, if I give you the option to go to the left door or to the right door, which one do you choose? Who cares? Who gives a... But if I ask you, like, there's a door before you and you cannot progress further, and this is the door you have to, you know, it's a problem, it's something you need to solve. Do you open the door sneakily, like a thief? Do you bash it with your axe like a barbarian? Or do you cast a spell and open it like a magician?
Sneaky.
Sneaky. So you open the door, you solve the problem, you progress the game and progress the story, and inside is an old wizard saying, "Oh, sneaky thief, I see. Just the one I could use for my next adventure." Or the same wizard says, "Oh, another fucking barbarian, go out, get off my lawn." Or, "Oh, a fellow magician, how nice to see you, blah, blah." And notice that there is branching in sense of three different ways to go after this choice, but the story is sort of doesn't change. It still flows. The main plot, the structure is the same. There is a wizard who needs some help. Maybe he'll get it from you as a sneaky thief. Maybe he'll deny it to you, or I don't know, grudgingly accept because, okay, you're a barbarian, but maybe barbarians can be helpful, or even, you know, get a great get new friend, like, oh, a fellow wizard to, I don't know, share spells with or something. So how choices not only solve the problem and let the player go through the game and the story, the how choices also build character. They tell me something about myself as a main character, so they connect me with the story. And this how choice is really a powerful tactic when you have to write that first choice in the game. Because, I don't know, there was a writer who wrote about a girl walking in the middle of the night. There's some rebels storming the castle, and he needs more than these 45 seconds to tell us who we are and what's going on. And he cannot realistically give us any relevant choice there, or very few, because each relevant choice would need a lot more info, especially in a dramatic situation when a little girl is being woken in the middle of the night by a rebellious band. So by crafting a how choice, like she assesses the situation, displaying characteristics of fear, or displaying the characteristics of fearlessness, or displaying the characteristics of, oh, but I'm a princess and I will not be disturbed by this raucous. So it gives you a little bit connection to your character, reveals a little bit about the character, makes you connected with them, and also providing like a meaningful, interesting choice. So that's why how choices are really cool. So they build the player character, the player is more invested in action, and feedback creates personal connection to the avatar, to the main character, which of course boosts the immersion. Suddenly you're not being info dumped, if you know what that means. So the writer is not like filling you with info. No, you're interacting, and you're interacting like something, like someone, displaying some characteristics. It's something that you know, every player would appreciate from a game. Of course, there's some cons, because depends on your story. They're not really suitable for moments where heavy branching is called for, because sometimes it is. But not only if you're writing an audio game where you want to keep the plot consistent mainstream so that players can say, oh, I played that game too, it's fun, because this and that happens. You know, and not like, oh, what game did you play? I played something different. It's also good for when you're writing for a game where you want your gameplay to make a difference in an ending or a story or whatever, but you want this narrative part to be linear-ish, so to say. Then then how choices are great. But if you want, player to go really vastly different areas, then not. This is really important because they really demand more clarity from a writer and more precise choice crafting. We had a writer who said something like, "Oh, I don't care for structure. I just, write by the seat of my pants." And he didn't make it because this kind of game is really difficult to write if you don't think about the structure and the game design and how it combines. That's why audio games are a great teacher, and that's why if you want to learn writing for games, start there really. So it demands really a writer to know their story and to know what they're doing. And of course, a prerequisite is a well-crafted plan, theme or plot, in sense that to make these choices, to imbue them with the proper characteristic or value, you need to know what kind of values are going to play in your game, what kind of theme is in your game. Because there's no point of discussing, the color of your pants if it's a game about, being a hero or a coward or something like that. So you always want to sort of plan this. That's why how choices are tough, but quite rewarding to write. Okay, finally. Meaty juice. The first game I want to present is called The Centaurian Princess. And please, you will have understanding that it's written by a young writer, a student. It's her first interactive story. She's named Raven from USA. And she really came up with some nice game mechanics, actually. That's why I like working with youngsters, because they really come up with some cool ideas. Even if the others will seem a bit naive. So this is her starting point. The kingdom of Centopia is in ruins. During their drunken festivities and delight, a dragon swept down and claimed the land for its own. Those who didn't partake in Dionysius' wine and wonder sought to slay the dragon in the name of King Titus, last king of the Centaurian bloodline. However, His Majesty finds the fight meaningless, for his people were nothing more than drunkards. Therefore, the king, despite being sworn to protect his people, stood by and watched his people be slaughtered. Now the deed of defeating the dragon falls to you, Princess Gabriela of Centopia. This is no longer a matter of pride or justice, it's about survival. Your every step could lead your kingdom to prosperity or permanent extinction. You must walk the path where your people stumbled. Fret not, for you will not be fighting this battle alone. In the midst of a mysterious meadow, you will discover a bar between worlds where the realms of magic and machines know no boundaries. For the future of your kingdom, you must decide, you're going to marry one of them, a pompous prince, a cowardice center, a psychotic cyborg, and a boring bartender. Yay! This is something like you would play? Yeah. Maybe. It's okay. It's an outline. It's something she started from, and I want to present it because for her, this was the theme. Like, okay, survival, and how will you deal with the dragon? That was her basic idea. Like, I wouldn't call it a theme, but it's like, what's the point of the story? And she wanted it to be about, choosing your partner for the battle and then maybe marrying them. So, sort of fantasy meets romance. And the choice is really interesting, like an elvish prince, a centaur soldier, psychotic cyborg, and a bartender. It sounds like a joke. Like elf prince walks in the bar with a psychotic cyborg. So this was the case. The theme of the story was how your actions would save the kingdom or not. There was a choice of suitors, and she also made this quite interesting, and that's the good part actually of her game. She sends you to one of the 3 locations where you find one of 3 weapons, you connect with one of the weapons, and the weapon tells you story, a memory of your father. You discover that he wasn't actually, someone who didn't give a shit, about the battle, but he had some other problems, blah, blah. And the choice of weapons affects your character, like do you pick a glaive or a sword or an axe? There's a different mythology connected with each, like halberd is a typically centaurian weapon, and sword is typically a human weapon. And the princess, we learn she can switch from one form or the other, being a human or a centaur. Luckily not the cyborg. And then the endings of this story were connected to do you marry elf prince, bartender, cyborg, or centaur, and usher your kingdom into one of these eras. So the first draft, she basically delivered a D&D-ish kind of story where there was a lot of what do you do? And as you can imagine, it was a wide story with a lot of branching, and branching with further branching, and those branching have more branching, and it was a mess. These smart weapons were cool, like unlocking memories and stuff, but there was basically a lot of what choices. And when you're faced with the what choice, which are not bad, I mean, I'm not advocating that you should quit or using them, but you have 2 choices. Once you start branching, you either go all the way and make a time cave structure and just branch, or you have to connect the story at some point and create this diamond shaped structure. Diamond shaped structures are dangerous, and we'll see why. Because for audio games, not so much, but for other normal games, are quite dangerous. So basically, this was a part of the structure of the story. So we start here, blah, 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 and then we reach the first major choice in the game. We go to one location, second location, third location, and on these locations we pick one of the swords and we get some more interactions and scenes. And this, if you're a programmer, you're going to say oh, this is unoptimized. Why didn't you just insert some variables and then don't have to have these 3 nested groups of choices? But she actually asked a question, and kept asking them, so that we really cannot compact these 3. So yeah, you go to this location, you pick a weapon, you go to this location, you pick the same weapon, but the stories you get from those are not the same, because what you do with these weapons on each location is not really the same. And it gets worse, because ultimately it just boils down to one moment where no matter what you choose, what you decide, you arrive at the same point. And if you're a player with option to replay your game, you're going to be very bored. You're going to say why did I make all these choices when I arrive at the same? You hope that the game will somehow remember your choices further down the line and make it worthwhile. But as you see, she didn't quit. She just continues, making it wider and wider. So in the first iteration, we first had to tackle the theme and make something about the mixed heritage princess, coming of age story, discovering her strengths and weaknesses, because just, saving the kingdom from a dragon wasn't really going to cut it, especially because it just explodes into a series of what. So that was a strategic level of how. Okay, let's save the kingdom from dragon, but let's make it important how you do it, instead of what are you doing to accomplish it. And then in second iteration, we came up with some game mechanics to underline the themes, to make the themes stronger, and to have these values of who is the princess, more present. But then it led us to 27 different endings. Is the princess brave, or brave as a centaur, brave as elf, brave as human, brave as and there was still not enough how in the tactical area. The choices were again about what do you do. But even if the game with replayability, it has to be a hell of a game to tolerate 27 endings. And in audio game, it was like, no, we will not publish this. So we had to continue working. And in third iterations, we trimmed the variables, like, okay, who cares if the princess is, I don't know, sword kind of girl or X kind of girl. Let's focus on some more values more important to the theme. Let's slice down the number of endings. And we actually, because now we didn't have so wide structure, with how choices, we actually managed to extend the playtime, because she came up with a like 60-minute story where the playthrough time is only 5 or 7 minutes. So by trimming the wide branching with more how choices than what choices, we were able to really streamline the game and extend the actual gameplay. And that's how the how choices came to power. Basically, and this is really helpful for a lot of games, not just audio games, you make a canonical story. Like, this is my story. And then all the branches are sort of dancing, spiraling around this canon. And believe me, it makes for a more focused storyline. It makes for like, but still giving each player and each playthrough a unique point of view. The second game I want to quickly come through, because we are ending the closing time, is the Last Voyage. And it's really important because Last Voyage was conceived by a writer who already went through this process of working with what and how. And it's really clearly visible because in the beginning he really sets things correctly. So the player is a part of a 5-person crew whose mission is to prepare a newly discovered planet for colonization. On their journey, there are technical problems, there's a suspicion, like is there someone of them going to sabotage the mission? And when they arrive at the planet, they have to deal with all the consequences of their actions. And as you already can see, this is something that you'll probably be more happy to play than the Centurion Princess. Yes, I hear your silent yes. And basically, he conceived the game to immediately, from the get-go, start with what's the player personality and what are the player's options. Will he be bold and cautious, confrontational or diplomatic? And it's not either or. It's like you can be bold, diplomatic, confrontational, cautious, all kind of combinations, which gives immediately playground for great how choices. And of course, very important thing, he weaved that the personalities of other 4 members of the crew are different combinations, so you will have a better relationship with some crew members and worse relationship with the others. And these relationships are not mandatory, like they're not going to push the story. It's just some options that the story gives you and makes quite interesting and varied gameplay. Another power of the how choices. So, as you see, the structure seems more focused. Someone would say maybe even too focused, too linear. But basically, you have little situations. And, you know, often a choice is like, writers want to give you like 4, 5, 6 different choices for each of the variables. But this dividing the variables into 2 groups allowed him to test, to ask through the story, like, are you brave or cautious? Are you diplomatic or crude or whatever? So through episodes, and each of the episodes are focused on how you deal with the specific situations, then you reach to the gateway, so to speak, where your previous choices are tallied, sorted out, remembered, and then again and again and again. And in the end, the game simply turns into a beautiful flower and remembers all of your choices and neatly places you in one of the 4 endings. And of course, he used the fact that one of the crew members mentions that this is not real, this is maybe just a test. And in the end, yeah, it was just a test to see if you're fit for the mission. And even if I spoiled you now, believe me, it's really well written, it's worth playing. So yeah, the key moment when we had to rebalance how and what is the moment of landing, because he made a little mess with some aliens, because after all things you land on a planet and there's some aliens appears and you're like, what aliens now? So we had to change that, but it was easy. It was something that he managed to change without having to write everything again, like the poor Raven had, because each time we changed something, she had to, basically destroy her WOT structure and make another one. Thank you for enduring this quite specific talk about how and what. And if you want to hear more about 4 downed L planes, 2 lawsuits, and the ways I reached this place, stay tuned.